There are billions of barrels of oil down there, but there's a lot more to heavy oil production than simply pumping it out of the ground. Oil comes with a lot of unwanted baggage, mainly water and sand. As anyone who works in the oil patch knows, oil, sand, and water together make quite a mess. It's also common knowledge that sand disposal is a major task and expense. We're not talking sand you'd find on the beach. This stuff's got to go. Let's look at some basic facts. As oil is pumped into a storage tank, it rises to the top while the denser water remains underneath it. Various particulates or grit, which we'll call sand, is suspended in the water and to a small extent in the oil itself. But over time, these sink as sediment to the bottom of the tank. A heat tube helps the process by keeping the oil warm and more viscous, especially in winter. Later, we'll look at some facts and figures, but for now, we're only concerned with the actual process. By now, we have a tank that's nearly full. A tanker comes to draw off the oil, but as the pumps continue the flow of oil, the tank is already beginning to refill. Of course, it's not quite that simple. What do we do with the water and sand that's left in the tank? As oil's pumped in, so is the water and the sand. Clearly, if the sand's not removed, it will fill the tank. The traditional method up till now has been to connect a hose to a vacuum truck to suck out the sand and water, an operation called stinging the tank. Since sand is not viscous, a stinging operation must first agitate and resuspend the sand, so the resulting slurry can be drawn off. Some of the water is recycled back into the tank, but the rest is left in the vacuum truck together with coarse sand to be hauled away for disposal. But the water still holds a lot of silts and clay particles, and the recycled water in there is far from pure. In fact, it contains some of the most troublesome materials the industry goes to such lengths to remove. Now, these operations are expensive. Not only are the costs of what we've seen high, but there's also the costs of disposal, which often involve trucking over great distances. These costs are repetitive over and over again. You guessed it, there is a better way, and we found it. In the mid-'80s, our president saw all the waste and high costs, so he set about developing a whole new theory. To remove sand from oil tanks, not as a slurry, but as a solid, using augers to extract and direct the flow of sand. In his own backyard, Wayne King invested all his resources in his conviction that a lot of money could and must be saved in the industry by improving on traditional but inefficient methods. Tests proved him right. Patents were registered, and awards for our work accumulated over time as his ideas became reality. To cut a long story short, Sand Control Systems Limited was born. Today, dozens of companies in the industry save millions of dollars using these modern systems. At the same time, Sand Control Systems satisfies much higher standards of environmental stewardship, and that's a rare combination of virtues these days. The good news is spreading far and wide. Hundreds of wells are now serviced by various applications, all invented, manufactured, and installed by a truly unique company. That's right, we manufacture every piece of equipment necessary to do the job, right here at our plant. So in essence, we really are two companies. We develop, manufacture, and install our sand handling systems simply because the equipment doesn't exist anywhere else. And we also service the oil industry by undertaking the work of removing, transporting, and disposing of the oil sand. We do it effectively and far more economically than it's ever been done before. Stick around, we'll show you how. Now we're going to see the right way to get the job done. As we've seen, the settling process leaves nearly all the sand at the bottom of the tank. Now, settling times have been determined by water treatment experts in the Betts Handbook, the leading reference for industry standards. As we can see, various grades of sand will settle in seconds. Silt takes longer at over 2 hours to settle to a depth of 4 feet, while bacteria and clay particles need substantial amounts of time. The problem with stinging to remove the sand is that it requires agitation, you could say unsettling or remixing the sand, silts, and clays back into the water, which destroys the benefit of the initial settling. Watch. But what if we could draw off the sand, leave most of the water where it is, and the oil above it intact? Impossible with a vacuum truck, but that's exactly what we do with GRS, our grit removal system. Quite a difference. The method on the right extracts maximum solids with minimum water and has no impact on the oil products, while the method on the left removes a slurry that is difficult to treat and returns a significant proportion of solids back into the production stream. Water treatment is another area where regulations and costs impact producers. Although the vacuum truck's been accepted as the industry standard, it returns more silts and clays to the tank than the grit hog method. As clays and fines are stimulated back into the tank, a buildup of slop oil occurs. It should be noted that slop oil does not occur naturally, it's created. This happens in part because the water in the vacuum truck doesn't have the time to allow sediments to settle adequately. And because the slurry is mostly made up of water, there's a far greater volume of water that has to be recycled. Even after the water has been recycled back into the tank, the load in the vacuum truck still contains more water than the sand control truck would. Now, if you have to pay to have sand carted away, you really don't want to have to pay the high price it costs to haul and dispose of a few extra cubic meters of water on top of that, do you? That brings us to yet another feature of sand control. Grit hog has also taken into account transportation. You can't put any kind of slurry into an ordinary truck because it leaks and would contaminate the environment. When there was no other way, that's what they did. More recently, vacuum trucks have been used as haulage vehicles, but that's an expensive piece of equipment to be used for haulage purposes. We recognized that transportation too involved a lot of problems and another set of high-cost operations. So we set about designing a truck that addressed the special concerns of transporting oil sand. A truck with facility for draining or recycling excess water and inspection hatches to ensure maximum water has been drawn off and only oil sand will be transported to the disposal location. A stable truck to handle uneven ground at unloading sites. We've also created a steep dump angle for more complete dumping. Note how the wheelbase shortens to enhance the dump angle. Note too that trailer stability allows the tractor to be placed in a jackknife position in cramped dumping areas. A pair of vibrators has been installed to release material that would otherwise remain undischarged. A lining of special non-stick material ensures the entire load slips out easily. And a fluid-tight sealed end gate guarantees containment. Perhaps most importantly, this lightweight truck has greatly reduced tear specs, which allows for a much greater payload, and that means fewer trips to the discharge locations. That's right, it cuts costs in many subtle ways, by quite a bit. All these features allow quicker turnaround time at the dump site, reduced hourly rate of disposal costs, and greater safety. Oh, and yes, our tub trailers have been approved by TDG inspectors for transportation of H2O washed oily So the grit removal system's used only to remove grit, while the tub trailer is used only for haulage, to haul sand, not a slurry with high water content. Now there is more than one system available, but they all use augers and they all operate under the same principles. Periodically, tanks do have to be shut down, drained, and cleaned. Using the grit hog, operations are quicker and less expensive. And you should note that the volume of solids to be removed is not increased with the introduction of flush fluid. The grit hog can mechanically open doors on a conventional tank and remove sand without human entry or environmental concerns. For this purpose, the oil and water must be drawn off first. Alternatively, augers can be permanently installed in the tank. And a grit licker will connect via a valve outlet, meaning sand can be removed while the tank contains large quantities of water and oil. Thus, sand removal can be achieved without interrupting the incoming flow of oil or shutting down in any way. A third option involves a valve system without permanently installing augers. Augers instead are inserted by penetration only when needed to draw out deposits of sand. Aptly enough, it's called the penetrator, and while small tanks may require just a single auger to draw out the sand, larger tanks may need a twin or triple auger installation. All of these GRS systems can be bought or rented on a monthly basis. We also have a rent-to-own program. Any of these options will very quickly return savings far greater than any investment in the system. Sand control systems have come up with another unique design, the W-bottom truck. It is fitted with its own onboard augering to discharge its load in a steady and controlled manner, and used for spreading oily sand as road material. Many analyses are taken in the field. Production samples show that oil products serviced by GRS are more pure because clays and fines are not returned to the storage tank. Okay, you've heard from us. Now let's hear from the industry.
The density of these solids that come into the interface are mostly less than 1.5 kilograms per cubic meter, down to even less than density of the crude. Therefore, by all means, the less agitation, the less pressure, the better it is to separate the solids from the tank. Not only that, if you got any crude in the tank, solids, when they come back into the crude, they are entangled by the crude and therefore the crude oil is off spec. It's imperative not to apply any pressure with additional water to the tank to get the solids out of the system. This will only stir the solids up. So therefore, with a new system, an auger system, you don't stir up the rest of the fluid, you only work on the solids phase. And the fluid, the water phase being used to wet the solids to come out of the tank can be the produced water, and no additional water need to be applied, such as is the case with Stinger or with high pressure nozzle systems for descending.
Simply put, because agitation necessary to stinging operations causes particulates to mix with the oil, it actually recontaminates the oil with resuspension of clays and silts. GRS just doesn't do that. In short, we do not create waste and we do not put fines back into the oil.
I'll tell you one thing, tank cleaning, sand handling has never been made easier than it is today. It's safer, cleaner, and a heck of a lot faster.
But we're not talking about one operation. What about multiple wells? Or multiple sites? With sand removal required several times a year, the bottom line becomes huge in a very short space of time. What we have is not mere speculation. Copious records have been kept and analyzed since we started. Tabulations of sites, loads, sample analyses have been carried out by us, by customers, and by independent laboratories. What it all adds up to is proof that every producer will save thousands of dollars from each and every well which employs the grit removal system of Sand Control. The two main reasons are that operations are cheaper to begin with, and the high cost of disposal at $65 per cubic meter is minimized by disposing of only sand, not slop oil or water. Operational costs and savings that are being made across the heavy oil patch far outweigh the investment right from the get-go. Installation need only take a few hours, and so benefits begin to accrue almost immediately. Give us a call. We'll be more than happy to show you how you can maximize your revenues and cut your costs with financing that's only a fraction of what you'll profit using Sand Control systems and the GRS. The GritHawk mandate is to greatly reduce volumes and ultimately costs of sand handling and disposal throughout the heavy oil industry. And the best part is you can bank thousands of dollars in savings before you repay a dime on your investment.